We are awaiting Senator Elizabeth Warren's official announcement that she's running for president in 2020. She's making that announcement in Lawrence, Massachusetts in just a few minutes. We're a few speakers away, so I'm going to bring the whole panel back with me. Let's talk a little bit about Leah, because Elizabeth Warren's background is sort of a complicated matter, but not least of which the fact that she's sort of associated with Massachusetts, where you also live. She's associated as being this Massachusetts liberal, when she's in fact, most of her life was an Oklahoma Republican. Is there some way that is useful to her, that background?
So I think she's going to try and use that, particularly as she's making her way through these Midwestern states, as she's pounding the ground. She's going to say, look, I'm just like you. You know, I grew up like you. I have common experiences with you.
She's kind of like Mother Jones a little bit.
So she's even, you know, she can also say, you know, I understand where you're coming from. Like, we're not that, you know, we're not that far apart.
Yeah.
And also speaking a language that I think is directly relatable to these issues that we're always constantly talking about, including identity, working class, bread and butter, you know, all of the things we say that Republicans and that Democrats have to hit on in the lead up to the 2020 election.
Yeah.
So all of that plays to her favor, provided she can, you know, stay away from the provocations of Donald Trump.
Yeah.
She is at her, you know, she's at her best when she finds a way to really straddle these worlds and then, you know, hit at these economic inequality policies that speak to people across class lines, across racial lines, across ethnic, across gender lines.
Yeah. And Gyasi, obviously the big sort of you know, cloud overhanging the entire process is Donald Trump, right? Donald Trump, who's singularly unpopular in the world. I'm looking at some polling here going many states, not your state, but Virginia, Pennsylvania, Nevada, Iowa, Michigan, Wisconsin, Colorado, Minnesota. He's deeply, deeply underwater. You can see on the side, that little last column, that's how far underwater he is in terms of approval and disapproval. I wonder how much Donald Trump figures into the choices that people are making about what they want. Is it an is it give me the opposite of this, or do people need to be making an affirmative case for themselves?
Unfortunately, the truth is that this is going to be an anti-Donald Trump election. And, excuse me, we saw to the degree that that worked in 2016, or it didn't work. I mean, that's the truth. The numbers say that it didn't work. And ultimately, it seems like there might even be more splintering in 2020 amongst Democratic lines, which could yield a similar result. To the degree that these folks, and specifically we're talking about Elizabeth Warren, do not offer up their own vision and instead are playing defense to some childish, racist, horrible remarks that Donald Trump might make. And so that was sort of the point of the first segment was, can we start getting to the vision? Can we start getting to what actually you're offering instead of a Maury Povich moment where you say, I have DNA of whatever, thereby emboldening a whole bunch of non-native people to speculate on what native identity means. But that just by in itself shows that she, at least at that moment, was playing the same game that Donald Trump has played. And that's not a good game. That's not going to lead to Democratic victory.
Yeah, it's difficult, you know, Karine, but because that is true, and also along the same lines as Gyasi was just saying, there's also the issue of just being a woman running, right? Yeah. That a lot of what you're going to run up against is the difference between the way women are treated when they seek power and men are treated. I mean, I raised the Kevin McCarthy issue as part of that same example. That Kevin McCarthy story came out about actually substantively benefiting from a claim of native identity to the tune of millions of dollars, his family benefiting, and that story actually came out like over a month ago and did nothing. Whereas with Elizabeth Warren, without any proof that she financially benefited, this is what we're talking about. And I wonder how much of that is that she's a Democrat, how much of that is that she's a woman.
I think a lot of that is she's a woman. Look, let's not forget 2016, sexism played a huge role in that election with Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump as well. And we saw that in focus group, we saw that in polling. Hey, we saw that when people were coming out of the exit polling and talking about why they voted for Donald Trump and how they felt about Hillary Clinton or a woman being president. And so that was really clear. And you see it now, the likability. Let's not forget when Elizabeth Warren first came out with her exploratory committee in December, there was this whole conversation about likability when guys don't have to go through that. When a woman runs for office, is she likable enough? And that's just all very, very ridiculous. And here's the thing, Joy, if when she announces today, clearly Elizabeth Warren's going to announce today, and Klobuchar possibly tomorrow, that's going to be 6 women. 6 women in a Democratic primary. That is incredibly historic, very diverse. So yeah, we're gonna see how being a woman plays out in this primary and in this election, depending on who becomes the nominee, clearly for 2020. But we have to remember, this is the first quarter. I think Jason was saying this, the first quarter of many quarters, and things are going to be different 3 months from now, 6 months from now. We're going to see how people feel about these candidates once they get out there, once they're able to put out their platform, once they're able to show if they can, you know, be president and beat Donald Trump. Look, the only data point that I can go back to when we're talking about what are voters looking for is 2018 in November. And there we saw that issues were really important. Healthcare was #1. People really cared about that. But also folks wanted to make sure that by electing folks into Congress and changing Congress, the House blue, that they were accountable for Donald Trump. So we're seeing a little bit of that as well. People want to make sure that whoever is the nominee can beat Donald Trump. But we're talking about Iowa, we're talking about New Hampshire, we're talking about South Carolina. People are going to want to hear what these candidates are going to do to move this country forward as well.
You mean they don't want to hear if they're nice? I thought they wanted to hear if they're nice. if they're nice. Jimmy's nice. Jimmy Williams, you're nice. So let's talk to you. We're going to talk about you being nice, even though you're a man, but we're still talking about whether you're nice. Because, you know, the thing is, I hear this all the time, and you know, Karine is obviously much better at this in doing political politics and campaign than I am. Like, she was way higher up level on the Obama campaign, like way. I didn't even know her. That's how high up she was. So she's way better at this than me. But I wonder, Jimmy, as somebody who's played in this game in terms of campaigns as well, do people really want the politics? Do people really want policy? Because we're all on this roundtable talking about the fact that people need to bring substance and bring policy, but the way that people typically actually win in politics is on X factor, is on this intangible quality that says, I feel like you're going to help me. Donald Trump had no policy, like except for, you know, locking brown immigrants out. I mean, I guess that's a policy. But what is it on the ground that actually moves the people to the polls?
So people care about a lot of things, but they care mostly about themselves. We're very selfish voters, as we should be. You know, if you're anti-LGBT, you're not getting my vote because I happen to be gay. Sorry. If you're anti-black, if I were black and you were anti-black and anti-civil rights and anti-Voting Rights Act, you're not going to get my vote. This is not complicated. Now, Karine said something really interesting, which is that women are held or have been held, and we certainly saw this in 2016, to a different standard of likability than men are. I agree with that was the case in 2016. I'll be very interested in watching how people compare Elizabeth Warren versus Donald Trump and his likability. The man has literally, physically, profoundly, and metaphysically sullied the presidency of the United States, the White House itself, the very core of our government. He has sullied that in every action that he has taken. I'm not saying that as a partisan, I'm saying that as a human being. So the question then is, what is his likability compared to Elizabeth Warren's or Kamala's or Sherrod Brown's or whomever? It doesn't matter. His likability is now on the chopping block.
Yep.
It's up for judgment. And so I think people care about that. The other thing they care about is the issue of electability. So if I'm a voter in South Carolina and I say, can Elizabeth Warren beat Donald Trump? Can Michael Bloomberg beat Donald Trump? Who's got the better shot? And that's when they have to make a judgment call, and it's still personal. So the issue of likability is on the table this time for men. I think it absolutely is. And I think people are going to sit back and say, do I like the person? I don't have to like all their policies. I want to beat the hell out of Donald Trump and get him out of the White House and never hear from that guy again. And are they electable? Yeah. Are they electable? That is the key here. That's what people want to know. That's it. That's all they want.
And are they electable, Jason, in terms of being able to carry African-American voters? There's an interesting dynamic now that Elizabeth Warren, and I think you and I both know that she's been kind of living in black churches and talking to black leaders because she knows that when you get to that Super Tuesday primary, it's also a lot of southern states, and that she's got to be able to play in the South, and that means African-American voters. Where does she stand vis-a-vis having to compete with Kamala Harris and Cory Booker for that vote?
So until we see what Biden does, what Bernie does, or what Beto does, the three Bs, the three white guys, right? The three more prominent white guys. There are white men who are running right now. Elizabeth Warren is in the best position to be the candidate, the Democratic candidate says, I'm the white person that's good with black people, right? Because I've said all along, Cory Booker or Kamala Harris, they got to get over 40% of the black vote in South Carolina or they're done. That is how they demonstrate that I'm not just a general population candidate, but I can move the African-American vote. So that they have a much higher threshold. But Elizabeth Warren, if she can establish herself, and look, she's been hanging out at black churches, she's doing the Wakanda salute, she's showing up at black colleges all the time, she's doing everything she can to hang around with as many black people as possible. I suspect that at one point she'll have one of those paparazzi photos of meeting with Stacey Abrams, because everybody else wants to do that, the sort of virtue signal that they're down with black people. So the issue is, can she be the 15 to 20% of the black vote, white person in the election? And if she is, she puts herself in a very good position to, if not win the nomination, then possibly be a VP pick. And I think that's something that everybody out there really needs to understand going forward in this election. You have multiple primaries. You have the electability primary. Can you win your nomination? You also have the general election primary. Can you beat Donald Trump? But you have the other African-American primary. Black folk are not going to sit around and wait anymore to be pandered to. African-American voters are not like white Democrats this year. They're not like LGBT Democrats this year. They're not like Latino Democrats this year. African-Americans are empowered in a way they have never been before. And if you don't have policy for black people, you will not be able to get ahead. You can't just get by with smiling and being friendly and having a nice partner. You're going to have to give something to black voters in order to win in these other states.
You're saying the Wakanda salute is not enough, which is shocking to me.
That
you're saying that's not enough. I'm going to go to Beth Fouhy because we're going to try to get another break. There were some power issues that are delaying the start of the Elizabeth Warren event, but we're going to come back to it in a second. But I want to really quickly go to Beth because the other blessing that Democrats tend to want is the Kennedy blessing. The Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama fought over it in 2008. Barack Obama won that and was able to sort of get that mantle of the Kennedy magic on him, which really upset the Clintons clearly. This time around, Elizabeth Warren is getting an early jump on at least a piece of that. Tell us a little bit about that.
Right. Yeah, so Congressman Joe Kennedy III is going to be introducing Elizabeth Warren today and endorsing her candidacy. We actually heard from Joe Kennedy a couple of days ago that he wasn't going to be a candidate for president himself this year, that he had too many other things on his plate. You'll probably recall, Joy, that last year after the State of the Union address, Joe Kennedy delivered the Democratic response, which shows that the Democratic Party definitely thinks he's an up-and-comer on his own. And the fact that he has that famous last name doesn't hurt. Now, the Kennedy mantle doesn't have quite the same magic, perhaps, that it did, 30, 50 years ago, back in the days of JFK. But it's something. They're the most famous and, probably nationally well-known and historic Democratic family in this country. So for Joe Kennedy, who is an up-and-comer, to throw his support quite clearly to Elizabeth Warren, it's helpful. It's not the biggest thing in the world, but it is something that she can point to, that this is a show of confidence from the most prominent Democratic family in the country, that she could carry on that family's legacy as President of the United States, Joy.
All right, well, we're going to take another quick break. We're going to sneak in another break because we know they're a little bit delayed. But when we come back, I want to talk about that other family whose mantle I'm sure a lot of people are going to want. The name starts with O and it ends with Bama. We're going to talk about the Obama primary because everybody, I'm sure, wants that blessing. Who's going to get it? Who's in line for it? And is Elizabeth Warren, who has a relationship going back to Harvard University with one Barack Obama, former president of the United States. We're going to talk a little bit about that when we come back. Elizabeth Warren's going to make it official. We'll bring it to you live after the break.